Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Bonjour, welcome to this week's episode of The Main Event as we finish our look at the Champions League season of 2005-06, where all roads lead to Paris. And I'm joined to talk about Barcelona's win over Arsenal with Adam Thornton. How are we, my friend?
Good. I wasn't sure why you went with a bonjour there, but it all makes sense now. I'd forgotten it was Paris. Yes, very good. As you trailed in the last one, round about this time, Barcelona and Arsenal were probably outside of Rangers, my two favourites. So this is very much my type of final.
Yeah, no lose for Adam. David Edgar is here as well as always. Good evening, David.
I did get why you had gone with Paris, Martyn, but I'm afraid you filled me with a retrofitted sadness that we haven't done that at the start of it. So you need to go back and re-record and start off with a hola if it's in Madrid, or that's. And by the way, that's the two words I know, hello and bonjour. So I'm out after that. But to Adam's point, you don't always in the Champions League get the best two teams in the final. This is one of the years that we did, and those are the ones that I think, as a neutral, really draw you in, where you think, right, here we either I can't pick a winner here. It's coin flip stuff, and these two deserve to be here, and either of them deserves to win it. It doesn't happen often, but it did happen here.
Interesting point. I think we'll get to the final obviously in due course, Adam, but you are talking about a storied old club that maybe have underachieved in the Champions League. Arsenal first ever Champions League final, European Cup final, and clearly a lot of pressure on them to start delivering. The team that scored the most goals against the team that's conceded the fewest, all those kind of attributes. Go to the semi-finals though. Are Arsenal better than Milan? Is Milan, Barcelona the two best teams left in the competition as they face up for the semi-final?
It's a tricky one. Probably in terms of, I'm going to say no, actually, which is a bit of a potentially a bit of a surprise. I just really like this Arsenal team, the balance of it, as we mentioned, the young players coming through. At this point, I was less and less engaged in Serie A. So it's maybe just my bias there, right into the Premier League in a big way. At this point, and still hanging on with La Liga. So it's maybe just my bias there, but I think my type of team, type of football I like to see play, I think Arsenal are just about edging it. At this point, I would concede that Milan have some better individual players, but I think just for what I liked around about this point, I'd have probably still picked Arsenal as the second best, if you like.
And Martyn, the reason I did it is an almost Ramsey-esque reason. I like teams that can do it at both ends, and this Arsenal team are really solid. And as well as Barcelona team, actually, I'm kind of glad we might get a chance to talk about a guy who I don't think gets anywhere near the amount of love from modern football fans he deserves, and that's Carles Puyol, who was an absolutely fabulous defender. They defended in different ways, these two sides, but they were both very, very difficult to score goals against. And I like, complete sides. We've all seen really good sides that win things that are brilliant going forward, but can be got at, or really defensively solid, but not the most fun to watch. I think both these sides had a terrific balance between what they did going forward and the responsibility that everyone had, which now we take for granted. That defending is a team thing. It starts from the front, all of the cliches. These are two sides that are exponents of that. They don't carry passengers.
Okay, these two semi-finals, 4 legs, 4 games of football, 2 goals. This is proper European football, no nonsense. Adam, that first leg in the San Siro, game almost kind of killed. 1 goal in the second half. Julie scores it. It is a lovely finish, but it's the pass from Ronaldinho. Be able just to turn and see that clipped ball through. It's exquisite. Your thoughts on that tie as a whole?
Yeah, I think Barcelona, just like we said, they just got an element of control about them at this point. Yes, there isn't a lot of goals in these, but I think they just make it count here. Julie was another who was a really, really good player, potentially a little bit not unloved, but maybe he's not a very Barcelona type player. And I think that's maybe a theme of Rijkaard. You look at some of the lineups that he puts out, and there aren't many what you would class as Barcelona style players kicking about. You've got lots of players who are individually great. You've got lots of players who can defend very well, Edmilson, Van Bommel, those type of guys. You've got Julie, who is maybe a bit of a precursor to Pedro, sorry, not Pedri, Pedro, who comes to the fore, but they feel a little bit less Barca. But take nothing away from them. They're very well balanced. Rijkaard does very well to manage all of those egos, which I think we've alluded to as well. But one that he doesn't need to bother with that is Julie, who's the consummate professional. He'll go on and have a pretty solid career after this. So it's fair to say this is the high point. He was a player that I really, really liked at this point. And yeah, I just think Barcelona, we spoke about it in the Stamford Bridge games as well, just not letting themselves get drawn into anything on the pitch, not doing the Barcelona thing that we've seen over the previous 10 years, really, of fucking up at key moments or scoring lots of goals, but not quite managing just to seal the deal. I think if you're talking about these semi-finals as a pair, particularly up against this Milan team, who, like I said, very, very good, always tactically astute, and have got serious firepower up front to keep the door closed in these 2 legs against that type of team. When you are Barcelona and historically defence has not been the thing that you prioritise, I think that's really impressive.
David, was there any chance of Milan getting back into that? Did they threaten much in that second leg?
No, they had possession at times, but I always felt that Barca were comfortable. This is maybe unfair. I think this is an easy thing to say, and I'm never sure it translates totally, but I did feel had Barca needed to, that they could have stepped it up. If you're a Milan fan, you might say, no, we're actually playing so well that they're at their maximum. But I never really felt that there was any serious jeopardy watching them. A couple of chances aside are going to make chances. But again, I just always had the impression, I mentioned last week that sometimes a side can feel their name is on it. Barca carried themselves in this way throughout this season. Although they're not quite firing in this leg as much as they could be. And maybe that is why I'm left with the impression that, well, they could have if they needed to. They just didn't need to. Maybe they couldn't have, and we'll never know, I suppose. But yeah, I agree with what Adam said there, to be honest.
So Barcelona through to their first Champions League final since 1994. Arsenal then, they could not have had a better chance, of course, of reaching the final. Villarreal have been impressive. We've gone into them in a wee bit of depth, obviously, over the last couple of weeks. But Arsenal, there's just never a better opportunity to break this barrier down. The 2 legs, Adam, kind of the same story in return. Arsenal dominate that game at Highbury, are all over the last European match at Highbury. Probably should have scored more than one. Couple unlucky, a couple of offsides. I think they were quite unfortunate or right on the line. Do score. Yaya Toure Kolo Touré pops up in the box. But it's all this pressure, only the one goal to show for it. The reverse is true in Spain. It's Villarreal flooding forward all the time. Arsenal, Lehmann, that defence that you've talked about, showing up until late on, until there's that rash challenge, and very late into the game, Villarreal have that penalty. It's Riquelme, and it's awful. It's an awful penalty kick. If Lehmann guesses the other way, it looks cool and stylish and iconic and just very much in keeping with the man, the myth, the legend. But it's poor. It needed to be laces. It takes the game into extra time. It doesn't. And Arsenal just have squeezed their way into that final.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. The first leg, 100%. They could have had a couple of goals. Villarreal have the better of the second leg. Definitely. Again, probably should have been winning. Even before that, it's quite an interesting battle, this one. Mentioned Senna and Takenardi forming that double pivot. Hadn't quite been invented at this point, but sort of forming that solid midfield too. The left-hand side for Villarreal, I think they definitely got a bit of joy there. They had Rodolfo Arubarena and Juan Pablo Sorin, another long-haired guy there on that left-hand side. Two fullbacks, essentially. Sorin had a bit more to his game, but I think he just helps that balance there. They didn't necessarily play with a right-sided midfielder. It was Senna on that side, and Diego Forlan would sort of drift into the channels. So that balance on the other side of those two, lots of energy, lots of legs, getting up and down against Alexander Hleb and Emmanuel Abui, I think at points is where you can see they got a bit of joy, certainly. So yeah, it was an interesting balance here. I think Wenger just plays a really, really sensible game. He goes with that 4-5-1 that we've mentioned. Reyes was suspended, so Pires comes in, and that's maybe why Hleb's playing on that right-hand side. Maybe doesn't have anywhere near the pace that Reyes does, but is a bit clever with it. Just a really, really solid Arsenal team, this one. Similarly, Villarreal, very solid, very aware, but coming up against a team that is in peak form in Europe, if not domestically. And I think the interesting point on here is Wenger admits himself he's not so big on the opposition analysis, and that might be part of his downfall when we move into this next era we've been speaking about. But one thing he does do here is he has Gilberto Silva basically just sit on Riquelme and just try and follow him about the pitch and deny him the space. And I think that helps. This is the hybrid game I'm talking about. I think that certainly helps them control that game. They don't quite manage to do it in the return leg, but yeah, just given that, you know what Riquelme's like. He wants lots of time on the ball. He wants to be the main man. If you stifle him, he's not exactly going to be someone who's going to shake himself out of it. He's very much a fair weather type player. And as good as he's been, as good as he was at Ibrox and all these things, it's really worth remembering that within 6 months he's taken a huff and upped and went back to Boca, to Argentina, never to be seen again. But yeah, I think Arsenal we spoke about the control of Barcelona there, and I think Arsenal are certainly similar. I think in this side they just deal with Villarreal in the way that other teams haven't, but in the way that big clubs really should for a team like this, who are set up in this way, and you've clearly got better players than them all over the pitch. So yeah, it was quite an interesting one, very tactical. Certainly the hybrid game, I watched most of that one, and it was very, very intriguing at points. Arsenal should have really put the tie to bed before they even got back to Spain. So there's an element there of luck in that game when you're, like you said, it literally comes down to the last kick of the ball. And it'll be going to potentially extra time and penalties, but they do the job, they get it done.
So, Paris, then we spoke last week about the narrative, and listen, we can never help but indulge in that. The media certainly can't help themselves. Why would they? It obviously sells stories. Davey, This is where Arsenal's eggs lie. They have had a fairly weirdly disappointing season, probably a sign of things to come. I think, Jose does finish. Wenger as this kind of serious threat at the league title, seems to bust that feeling of invincibility that they had. Semi-finals, I think, of the FA Cup or League Cup. Sorry, fourth round of the FA Cup, fourth in the league behind that Liverpool side that Adam did not love, and Manchester United, who were second but miles behind. I think 8 points behind Chelsea in the end. But this is clearly for quite a while where everything has been headed, and who doesn't love fairy tales, right?
Absolutely, and we've spoken about it long and weary on this show that this is a club for its history, size, and resources that have consistently underachieved in this competition. Here they are with the French manager who revolutionised not only the club but the game in this country when he arrived. He's going back to France. They've got the French captain leading the line for them spectacularly, who is at this point certainly in the chat for the best player in the world. All the stars are aligning in that way. I think it would have been handier had they maybe faced a side who weren't feeling that the stars were all aligning for them as well. But there was no doubt going into this match that Arsenal were capable of winning this. It would not be a major shock for Arsenal to win this match. I remember that the bookies did that thing bookies do when they're not sure whether both the same odds to lift a trophy, which I think is cheating. But no clear favourites. And that told you how evenly matched the teams were. You've got a team that do not concede many goals, that have lethal pace, lethal striker when they get moving. I did wonder at the time if Arsenal maybe had the players in midfield to shut them down. You just mentioned Gilberto Silva. I was maybe overrating the job he did on Riquelme, Adam had mentioned, because I was maybe overrating Riquelme from the game against Rangers. So there was possibly an element of that, but I did think, I think Gilberto Silva is one of those players that you don't really talk too often about, but then you remember him and you think, "God, he was really good." He was top of his game. And I remember the build up to this, Martyn, and you guys will as well. The papers were very much harping on the destiny thing and Arsenal arriving as a European force. We're looking at this now with hindsight, and we know that this is the end of, as you mentioned there, Wenger as a serious threat. We're only 3 years away from them losing 8-2 at Old Trafford. So they don't know this then. To them, this is just the culmination. It took Ferguson 10 years to 13 years really, but I suppose even 9 years from winning a trophy to win the Champions League. Wenger has been here now coming up on 8, and this looks like, here we go. This is the step. And at this point, if Arsenal win this, then they go on, and who knows, they could maybe go on and be a real European force. Instead, they go the opposite way. This is the high water mark. After this, they will shrink domestically, and in Europe, they will become a last 16 quarter-final at best team, and that is absolutely their level. But we didn't know that then, and obviously in the UK, we are going to follow the British side more. We're going to be we're going to be exposed to more of the coverage from this point of view, and I think there was this real sense within British football that this was a culmination for Arsenal and that they would go on and do it. And there were other parallels, Ferguson winning that Cup Winners' Cup against Barcelona all those years before. So there were quite a lot of comparative things between then. This would top it off for Wenger, and it absolutely would have. This would have put him among the greats. And I was really excited. There are certain finals where you're always going to watch them, but I'll give you a recent example: Manchester City Inter. As much as I'm fond of Inter Milan, I didn't expect a classic. This one I expected a tight but brilliant game. I thought it would be lit up by, great goals, and it would be in the mixer for the full. I possibly see it going all the way. It was that type of game, and it was one of those ones you sat down really, what's going to happen here? It had that classic, world heavyweight boxing feel of let's finally see these two get in the ring and slug it out. And it was a fresh fixture. We've mentioned there, Manchester United, Juventus seem to play every Chelsea and Barcelona recent one. This felt fresh.
This is new. Yeah, it did. Adam, we don't really ever do this, but I'm going to ask you to look at these two 11s and break down, I guess, strengths and weaknesses and how they were kind of put together, if you don't mind. David's mentioned the defences quite a bit, and Arsenal's is, and it feels like you don't even have to look at, Lehmann and goals, Cole, Campbell, Toure, Iboué. It feels like it has, like, Arsenal defences of old, something very familiar, very reliable, and very cohesive, because they're kind of always there. That Barcelona back four, Valdez, of course, in goals, Rafa Marquez and Puyol, younger Puyol, I suppose, just kind of coming through. Gio at left back, Oliguer at right full back. How do they compare, do you think?
Well, I think the most obvious thing here is something that we mentioned there. It's a very un-Barcelona DNA team, if that collection of words makes sense together. I'm not sure if I've really got my tongue tied there, but yeah, I think they show them a bit of respect here. I was really surprised that Belletti didn't play, because he had been fantastic. He's the prototype precursor to Dani Alves, really, and I think you see that with the goal that he comes on and scores. But playing Oliguer, who Barcelona like that when centre halves are coming through. Puyol played right back for a good few years. They do kind of like that sort of proven ground, if you like. But still, Oliguer coming in is much more of a defensive player than Belletti in there. No Xavi or Iniesta in the starting lineup in this one, which is a bit of a shock, certainly in Xavi's case. He definitely hadn't quite got to where he was. He didn't play huge amounts in this season, but potentially he was injured. I can't quite remember, but he's on the bench, so he's obviously not injured enough. But going with Edmilson and Mark van Bommel, again, feels very un-Barca, like that sort of midfield three that they've got with Deco there. Deco is a Barcelona type player, but yeah, it just feels like they showed them quite a bit of respect in the game, and I think that's potentially why we don't quite see a classic, because Lehmann gets sent off. Pretty much the only width in the game, really, through Robert Pires, gets sacrificed, and it maybe just Barcelona don't quite have that sort of attacking verve. They've got too many defensive players on the pitch. They were expecting a different type of game, and it maybe changes things about. I don't think there's any surprise that Edmilson comes off at halftime and Andres Iniesta comes on as they try and get a bit of a foothold in the game, and I think you probably see that being quite pivotal in the end. Mark van Bommel coming off on the hour for Henrik Larsson to come on as well just sort of shows that they're going for it, and they really start to open it up. Arsenal really struggling with that 10 men so early on, struggling anyway with the fact that Almunia needs to come on as well, who I was never a great fan of. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame that red card potentially ruins it a little bit as a spectacle. Arsenal get the goal from a set piece, and they're doing okay. I remember thinking it was gonna happen, because as it ticks on, you could see Ronaldinho in particular in the game getting visibly frustrated. Not very much is going on for him. He's trying his best. It's not quite happening. It really is Belletti coming on for me, and then starting to get in behind, starting to really make an impact on the flanks that sort of changes the momentum of it. But up until about an hour, I did start to feel maybe Arsenal are going to get this. They're going to sneak it. You've got Henry on the break, who anything can happen with. So yeah, it was an interesting one, a bit more pragmatic, I guess, than you would think from these two teams at this time. But yeah, I think they may be just trying to cancel each other out a little bit.
Is Arsenal, because obviously the Barcelona 4-3-3, that is DNA, as you've mentioned, and Eto'o again leading that line, Ronaldinho and Julie, it's at least how they started. How 4-4-2 is that Arsenal 4-4-2? Could you get Gilberto and Fabregas in the middle, Pires, as you mentioned, Alexander Hleb, who we kind of discussed, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and then Freddie Ljungberg off of Henry, very much a support striker rather than a two? Is the old approach Jose Antonio Reyes to play off of Henry? Does that work? Does Henry need someone to come in deeper and therefore spring that space for him to run into? How does that all come together? Because it's not a George Graham 4-4-2.
No, it's not. It's also not the sort of high line that we had seen a couple of years before the Arsenal offside trap. Maybe quite a few years before at this point, if we're being honest. So it's not quite that. As well, I think Henry did like that sort of pace. He obviously loved the pace in behind. Didn't see a huge amount of centre halves pinging balls over that I can really remember. So I think it's an interesting approach because you kind of need that, I guess. But if you don't have that, then the sort of give and goes that you mentioned there would be best to sort of quick interchanges and release the ball through for him. Guys like Ljungberg, Fabregas, Hleb were masters at that. Those sort of slide rule passes to get him through and then on goal. And once he was in on goal, there was no stopping him. Similar to Ronaldo a few years before, just absolutely cool as anything when he gets through. So yeah, they were kind of floaty. Reyes was the only really. Perez was never really a jet-heeled winger, was he? He was more of a winger than the other guys that were mentioned here, but he was never that.
He was clever.
Hit the byline.
Yeah,
hit the
manipulator
byline,
of the ball.
Get the ball in. So he sort of floated in. Ljungberg, Hleb, all kind of operating in the same spaces, which I guess gives you that rotation. But I think definitely it was, I would say, more of a sort of 4-5-1, particularly in the European games. Ljungberg or Perez, depending who it would be, were obviously not Bergkamp. They were not the sort of, not goal scorer. I think Bergkamp would never be classed as a goal scorer, but definitely more end product, more threat than them. They were these sort of new age, if you like, winger / number 10s that were kind of coming to the floor and could float about a bit more than maybe Bergkamp did. So yeah, it's all based on getting the ball between the lines or over the top to Henry in whatever way worked best. You've got Gilberto Silva anchoring the full thing, allowing Fabregas to play a little bit further forwards, and then you've obviously got the sort of flying fullbacks and Ibui and Cole offering maybe more of the width than guys like Ljungberg, Hleb, Perez would be doing. Yeah, so it's an interesting one, definitely.
And is that 4-5-1 becoming more de rigueur around this time?
Definitely, I think that's the reaction. We've spoken before about the 3-man midfields that were sort of coming to the fore. More and more clubs are doing this now. England were late adopters of it. As we know, the sacrifice was the second striker. Obviously, just comes back and starts to play much more in the midfield. If it is a number 10, it's a number 10 with lots and lots of responsibilities, rather than that Riquelme number 10 that was dying out. You'll start to see Santi Cazorla, for example, coming to the fore at Villarreal, and it's that type of player who's a lot busier, able to shut down space, more tactically aware, a bit more energy about them. So I think that's it. And with that being a fact that teams wanted to clog the midfield, obviously the other way that you could do that was to go to a back three and still try and keep the 2-man up top, but that's a whole catch-22, isn't it? If you've got a back three, if you're playing one up top, you don't need a back three, and vice versa. So it's all a bit of a self-perpetuating thing. But yeah, I think that 4-5-1, if you want to call it that, I'm sure some teams will call it 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. But certainly for Arsenal, I always felt to me when they did do it. It was more of a 4-5-1 without being ultra defensive and based on counter attacking.
Yeah.
Adam just said something. Sorry, Martyn. Sorry.
I use the term de rigueur there, not because the final was in Paris, just because it's a well-known common phrase.
I liked it, but Adam said something that really I thought was really interesting, and it's really been brought home to me throughout this show. England don't develop tactics, do they? He mentioned there they were late adopters. England, things start in other countries, and England then hire the coaches in. It seems to me they don't develop any styles. There's nothing new.
Not since the 1920s. No,
nothing new starts there. They hire the best of the guys and then they will adopt it. But you can't really think that the stuff that we've seen and throughout this show. There's been styles that have emerged in the Netherlands, in Germany. Will come up, in gegenpressing, etc. Right, in Italy, there's that definitive style that they have, and formation and tactical Barca, tiki-taki, all these things. Nothing from England, nothing.
Do you know what's also equally as interesting on that as well is that maybe we just don't have the time yet. But this latest iteration of Guardiola's City, Arsenal are sort of copying that with the sort of physical players and the centre halves, etc. But other teams in the continent are still trying to copy Guardiola's Barcelona or maybe more Bayern Munich style now. Like you see obviously Leverkusen and various others around the world, but there's not too many that are copying the current things from England. Even Klopp's sort of heavy metal, I know that's influenced by Dortmund and by Red Bull and gegenpressing, etc. But the way that he adapted and tweaked that, I'm not sure there's many that are really doing that yet. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Even if something does come to England and becomes pretty much par for the course, we even see Southampton trying to copy what Guardiola was doing as a sort of bottom end team. But it's not doesn't seem to travel outside of England. And yeah, right before Herbert Chapman was probably the last, wasn't it? The last proper something being born in England tactically that would go around the world. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's happened since.
And there's not a revolutionary explanation for this, but in how many episodes we've been doing of this series, Bobby Robson, the only English coach we've mentioned, they're not and still aren't producing managers of any great note, which is part of the problem. David, Adam said the match might have turned on the red card. The match turned on the red card. It's a huge moment in a final, not just because of Lehmann's replacement, the withdrawal of Pires, a huge moment. First things first, there's controversy apparently around this red card at the time. Yeah, I mean, you speak to or hear Wenger after it, not happy. I for the life of me couldn't see where the controversy. So sober and fair and even
fair, yeah, and he sees everything that happens involving his team, especially around red cards. I'm stunned at that. I don't like that rule. I'm glad they got rid of it, but it was a rule and it was a red card and penalty. So
Barcelona scored though. So Barcelona got a goal chopped off effectively because he's basically blown for the free kick and the red card, and Ronaldinho kind of sent one past the post, I think.
There was no conspiracy here. It's a penalty, it's a red card. I felt diddled at the great game that I'd been looking forward to, but not by the referee, by Jens Lehmann. It's a piss poor decision. You don't do it, especially not with 20 minutes on the go. You take the goal basically, and you think that you trust your teammates that are able to get back into the match. I'm stunned actually that I get a manager, with the adrenaline coursing through the disappointment to come out and say that, but I can only assume, Martyn, that it was the old he spoiled the game, which is never a good reason. He shouldn't have done that because the world was watching. As a neutral, it was disappointing for me. As a Barcelona supporter, I would have been outside the gates of Neon the next morning with my with my bedsheet protest going on, because it's a stolen wall penalty and red card. And it does change the match dramatically. Arsenal have to change their system. It's then, can Arsenal break them down? Arsenal are resilient. Show it. Adam's right. They have terrific pace on the counter. So the game's not dead, but it would have been a major shock after 17 minutes should Barcelona not manage to go on and win it. A match played to a conclusion that night. But for me, the villain of the piece, we David Neutral, was Jens Lehmann. A poor decision. He makes a conscious decision to do what he does, and he does.
He comes out. He's lost. Is it Etu? If I forget who he brings down, but there is a flick. There's a flick of the hands, and it is deliberate. But Adam, he's put in that position. I mean, that defence opens like the Red Sea. This defence that's been so tight and so frugal, and all of a sudden, quite early in the game, only 18 minutes, is getting kind of ripped apart. I would agree with David. He's made the wrong decisions, but he's been given a decision to make, and he shouldn't really be in that position. Is Pires the right call? Because that, of course, was the other conversation piece at the time. Pires leaving Arsenal. This is his last game, and again, a narrative around that. That's what a very downbeat way to kind of end your career. Was there another move that Wenger could possibly have made? Ljungberg?
Yeah. I don't know if I would take Ljungberg off.
He loved Ljungberg. I mean,
and I think it'd be Kleb for me. Probably it'd be Kleb for me. But it's just easy sort of looking back the way. But yeah, and he's sort of first season at Arsenal. Yeah, I can understand why Pires comes off. It'll be the sort of legs factor down to 10 men. He'll be worse than a man down, given he's at the other end of his career, and he's never really been that type of player either. So I can understand it. If you don't take Pires off, then you've got 10 men plus Robert Pires as well. So I kind of get it from that point of view, but you probably do miss a little bit of guile there. I don't think as well the the Arsenal team are used to dealing with this type of pace.
There's not a team in England close to playing like that, right?
No.
I was thinking, like, obviously you've got Chelsea, but it's different. That's like they're wingers.
Yeah.
Like
more power, less pace.
Yeah, Duff and Robin, the positions they're taking up, you know what Robin's going to do. Duff's very conventional. I just don't think the way that they're attacking centrally with pace, the only team that really do that in England at this point is Arsenal with Henry. Yeah, I think it probably just takes them by surprise. But yeah, I don't think so. Looking back, even looking at the bench and things as well, obviously they've got Reyes on there who would have helped. They've got Bergkamp who doesn't make it off the bench, Van Persie who doesn't make it off the bench. Could they have done something later in the game? Potentially. I think Arsenal just sort of get what's the words? Maybe it is a Wenger thing. Then this is, I don't know. I've not really looked in terms of what his decisions were like after this final, in terms of what type of manager he would go on to want to be. If there was anything he thought he would do differently on there, I've not quite got to that point yet. But we'll maybe pick up on that next week. But it sort of feels like they're just hoping that something bad doesn't happen. As soon as that red card happens, just hoping, and then almost don't really want to make any risky moves that might get the game back in their favour or get them to lose it. So Reyes coming on 85 minutes over Bergkamp and Van Persie, to me, is one of those substitutions that you're bringing on a lesser quality player, but who will still work hard in a 10-man defence rather than maybe someone who's more likely to get you
more of a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
But they do go ahead. Brilliant Henry free kick and great Campbell header. Bless him. I'm now kind of conditioned by this point when Sol Campbell scores, a header in big games, that it's going to be ruled off somehow, that someone's punched someone in the ribs, or something's going on, given what's happened with England 2004, 98. But it's fine, it's good, and Arsenal have got something to at least hang on to. You mentioned the substitutes changing the game, Adam, later on. Of course, they do for Barcelona, but it should be mentioned, though, early in that second half, or the first half of that second half, Arsenal have chances to win this game. Ljungberg should have probably scored. Kleb is unlucky. It's certainly not a sitter. But you mentioned Henry being as reliable as the original Ronaldo when put through, when racing through, all the goalkeeper to beat. And he kind of was around this time. He does not have a good night. He just, there's an anemic sitter at 1-0. It's just straight at Valdez. He has talked about it since. He says there's not a day that goes past without him thinking about this final. To win it with Arsenal in Paris would have just been the ultimate. He, of course, goes to Barcelona soon after, and they've got the picture of that final up in the training ground. He has to see it every day, and he absolutely hated it. And he blames himself because he didn't play well. Forget about the referee, and we'll talk about goals to come. He could have finished that, and Arsenal could have finished that. For all that the subs are going to make a difference for Barcelona, it might have been absolutely academic.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Obviously, we talk about the red card changing the game, but there's plenty of examples where it doesn't really need to. And I think if you've got players like Henry, who's one of the best in the world at this point, certainly Gilberto Silva, who's can't be far off of it, Fabregas, who's well on the way to it. You'll be looking at those type of guys, maybe not Gilberto Silva to go and win you the game, but you know what I mean, he'll offer the base. You'll be looking at those guys to come on and come into the game a lot more than they did. That chance, you're right, he should have done a lot better with that as well. So there's an element, I think, of the decision of the red card, the responsibility of the players, the setup. Maybe they could have went a little bit more attacking at a point, maybe even when Etu got the goal. But the fact that the second goal comes so quickly after it maybe just kills it. But yeah, I think that there are certainly points within that they could have done a lot better themselves, even withstanding the red card. And I think it's full credit to Barcelona. Like I said, that those subs are game changing substitutions.
Yeah.
They're bringing on a lot of talent that's on the bench, but match winning talent. Arsenal have some of that as well, like we said, and they chose not to make those subs. They chose to hang on to what they had, and that's ultimately, I think, their downfall here. I'm not saying if Van Persie or Bergkamp comes on, they automatically win the game, but I think for me, it's just one of those situations that it's maybe better to go down fighting than just not really do too much and be sort of paralysed by that fear. Interesting one as well, I'd forgotten about that I was looking at, was the linesman. Remember the linesman got he was pictured in a Barcelona shirt before the game, and he got stripped of his duties. I'd forgotten about that one as well. That would have been, imagine that was a Chelsea-Barcelona final.
Yeah, I can very much imagine. Yeah.
That would have been wonderful. The one thing though, Adam, I do wonder if it is the almost the noob versus the old guard here, and by that what I mean is Barcelona European final is fair enough, right? Kind of expected. Arsenal second final, I think. Well, certainly no, fourth final, but first in 15 years and first in the European Cup. Is there a sense perhaps that had it been Barcelona, they'd have went, let's go for it, we'll be back soon anyway. Arsenal are so close, let's not give it away.
Absolutely.
Get right here.
So that's where the conservatism come from. Of course it is. You're in, I mean, 6 years since they were in a European final. They lost to Galatasaray.
Of course, sorry.
2000. But still, this is it's their first Champions League. The first club to lose all three, by the way. All three trophies. But that's absolutely where it comes from. I think Barcelona understand for a reprieve. Arsenal haven't taken their chances, and then this wave after wave after wave. The equaliser comes 14 minutes to go, David. So it's a flowing move. Larsson's pass to Eto'o is superb. Eto'o's finish, given that the right hand side of the goal as he sees it, has to be where Almunia expects him to go. It's the space, just curl it into that corner. He doesn't. He goes the other side. Huge risk, but it makes sense in a kind of counterintuitive way because Almunia is wrong-footed. He's going the other way. It's such calm composure. Everything we've talked about Barcelona over the last couple of weeks in microcosm. I would, however, have loved a bit of VAR action on that pass. I don't think we ever get the angle we maybe need. It's very tight. The lines would be out there in force, but a break they probably did deserve. And then the second goal felt, as it did, become very, very inevitable as well. Arsenal were done. They were holding on, and now they had nothing to respond.
No, that's very fair. I agreed with a point Adam made, which is about 60 minutes. I'm waiting from the 17th minute, and even with the Campbell header for Barcelona to just go and win the game. Half time, I do not think Barcelona Arsenal can win this game. 60 minutes, I'm starting. Just that longer it goes. But I think every man and their dog knew that if Barca get one, Arsenal could win that game 1-0. And the Arsenal players clearly believed that. As soon as it goes, you're spot on. You see it, don't you? You see the reaction from players. You see the reaction from the Barca players. You see the reaction from the Arsenal players. The Arsenal players are not even defiant. They're shattered. They're physically and mentally. And no wonder, you're chasing this Barcelona team about for an hour. It's inevitable, you're right. It would have been tight either way. Is that the best way to put it? And I suppose in that era of football, the linesman is doing the right thing by
absolutely.
Benefit of the doubt, erring on the side of caution. These days, I think it would have been. But hey, for all we know, it is on. I do think it was coming though.
Absolutely.
I think. Even if it gets to, because again we go back to that Chelsea game, they will not panic Barca. They will not start lumping the ball in and making it easier. They will ask questions right up to the 93rd, 95th minute, whatever. They will keep going. And Arsenal were just done. And sometimes we don't take into account the emotional energy that players expend in matches like this. That can have an effect on them physically. Arsenal wilt after this goal, and again to pick up on a point Adam said, Belletti is really, of all these wonderful talented superstar players who've been lauding all season, Belletti is the one who's the agent of change in this match.
Interesting to pick apart Arsenal's decline. They'll be in a semi-final 3 years from now, but obviously never grace the final stage again. Adam, to finish, how loved was Frank Rijkaard at the time, and does what happens next in Barcelona's history pretty much obliterate that standing they had? Because that's a long wait, and in its new brand, this new Champions League is not the old European Cup that they've only won once. This is a big moment for Barcelona. It's a big breakthrough for the club, and sets up what's coming soon, surely.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget what he does here, but we've spoken about that Louis van Gaal legacy. Not really in a good way. Ajax players coming in that not really what they need at the point. They sort of almost double down on their identity, but not in the best way. Going through various coaches. Rijkaard comes in, who isn't really in either of these camps of Cruyff or Van Gaal. Doesn't really have that, to my mind anyway, doesn't really have that a particular style. It's maybe not a surprise that he hasn't really done too much since. He's one of those guys, just right place, right time, does a really, really solid job, gets them back onto an even keel, gets them winning league titles again regularly. Obviously, wins this Champions League here, gets them the riches, allows them to sort of clear up some of those mistakes of the past, brings through some of the guys who'll form the nucleus of the team for the next 10, 15 years, and Puyol, Victor Valdez, Xavi, Iniesta, Messi coming through. So I think he does a really solid job. And there's been quite a few times now that we've spoken about the guy before the guy. And I think we've tried to shine a little bit of a light on them because it is very easy. He is a bit of a forgotten man, I think, but only because what comes next is just something that I got so invested in, because that's how, at that stage, that was something that we hadn't really seen, that intensity, the choreography of it all. It was also so perfect, fantastic. This young team who'd come through the academy, smashing everyone before them. I think it's easy to sort of forget the guy that comes before that and puts the base there. Plenty other managers at Barcelona, decisions would have been taken maybe to sell some of those players a little bit earlier and get some money and try and bring in another Asian superstar that might not come up trumps. So in a way, he certainly deserves credit there. He got them very successful, but also sets the framework for what will be coming very, very soon.
It's a fascinating career because a managerial career, because he was shattered at Euro 2000. He genuinely thought that the Dutch were going to win at home. There's this picture of him after that Italy semi-final, just sitting in the stadium, just looking out, crestfallen. It's empty. It's hours after the game. And then does he go to Sparta Rotterdam or some random place? Pitches up at Barcelona, not with a history as a player. There, don't think he played for Barcelona, did he? I know he's Dutch and probably the only Dutch player of that era not to play. But he wins 2 titles and obviously this Champions League, which I think psychologically must be so important for the club and what follows. And then go to Turkey, with Galatasaray, and then maybe some Saudi money, and then he's done nothing for. He just that'll do. Yeah. And maybe the insight, and I would love more former players to maybe have this insight, that this isn't for me, really. I was a great player. I find it really hard to work with players who are not as good as me. There's only a few clubs where I could do that, and I'm maybe just not cut out. I've made a lot of money, and I'll put my feet up.
There's a couple of
he just kind of missed.
Sorry, there's a couple of comparisons I put forward. The modern one, of course, is Zinedine Zidane and his achievements at Real Madrid, but shown absolutely no interest at all in going in to manage any other club. And if he does manage again, I suspect it might be back at Real Madrid. The other one is quite neat to me, Martyn. He's a little bit like Roberto Mancini to Pep at City.
Yeah.
He shares a similar thing where I'm sure the fans, if you speak to Barcelona fans, remember him fondly enough, because obviously, as you say, he did put and it's the same with City fans, but out with that, our eyes as people who are not fixated on those two clubs are drawn to, well, the same guy actually, Pep, and fabulous achievements afterwards. And it goes both ways, because Barca win European Cup after Pep departs, but it's not thought of in the same way. His glory, or the shine that he does, it not only blacks out the person behind him, it blacks out the future as well somehow. It's such an important part of football that what happened either side of it, to those of us not Barcelona fans, doesn't seem remotely as interesting. But you're right. He's one of these managers who have these strange careers where they win absolutely everything and then they just sort of disappear. And he's one of those guys. But as you say, he maybe did realise that, you know what? I don't need this hassle. I don't need the money. And I can point to my Champions Leagues and La Ligas and Copa del Rey's and say, well, that's what I did.
He just missed the Barcelona playing career. If you like, remember, obviously we've covered it quite a long time back now, but his final playing career game was the final that Ajax won, and he retired after that. Obviously, that was when that team were getting broken up and would move on. So had he been a couple of years earlier, yeah, maybe he would have. But he was Hiddink's assistant, wasn't he, at World Cup '98 before he got the job, and I can kind of see that. It's quite a similar playing style. I think the sort of Hiddink approach. It's not quite as we said, zealous as the Van Gaal approach or the other way in Cruyff. So that sort of makes sense to me. The style that we're seeing here. We've seen some Hiddink teams that are quite similar to this, arguably parts of his Chelsea team. But yeah, it's interesting. It probably speaks to the state that Barcelona were in when Rijkaard got the job, because as you mentioned, 2000 he's gone. Sparta Rotterdam, like you said, but they got relegated when he was there, and he resigned. He received a death threat and resigned the year before he got the Barcelona job. So it's one of those things that it was a punt for Barcelona, but it's a punt for Rijkaard as well at this point, because I'd be interested to know why. It's maybe something we can dig into, why he went there, having no affiliation. Maybe it was just the Dutch players there and the Dutch influence at that point. He decided to go, but yeah, one of those unlikely marriages that is very, 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 very fruitful.
Produce beautiful children.
Yes, absolutely.
Gentlemen, that's us for 0506. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
A victory lap for you. Thank you, David.
I can't help but feel we're going to lose all the Arsenal fans that have been listening now. I think this is what they came for, and we're going to see a drop-off.
0607 is next, and both of these finalists turfed out at the last 16 stage. It is the final, as we said, great Milan side. A bit of a surprising Manchester United resurgence, and what's that? A Liverpool-Chelsea semi-final. Oh, good. Cannot wait for that. It's 0607 next week. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.